Make sure you're the first to watch Road to Cheltenham every week. You can do that by joining Racing TV. Go to racingtv.com/join to become a member and to see Road to Cheltenham as we go out live. Hello everyone, welcome to the second edition of this series of The Road to Cheltenham. Now press record, strap yourself in because we're pressing the accelerator pedal this week. We do have to introduce Ruby Walsh though, so let's say hello to Ruby. Ruby, how are you?
I'm great, Lydia, yourself?
Yeah, very well, thank you, very well, thank you. But let's get on with it, shall we, straight away. Start by talking about what it takes to win a Ryanair. We're asking that question because Imperial Aura was so impressive when winning the Chanel Farmer 1965 Chase at Ascot at the weekend. Unusually, Ruby, they've already said they fancy going for the Ryanair. The Ryanair, the target, not the Champion Chase, not the Gold Cup.
Well, he doesn't look to have the speed to win the Champion Chase, so you can rule that one out. And they're giving him time to develop, like they did with Imperial Commander, maybe, before stepping him up in trip for a Gold Cup. Obviously different trainers, but same owners. And he was impressive at the weekend. He's can't say course and distance winner. I know he won the Novice Handicap Chase at the festival, but that was on the old course. The Ryanair is, of course, on the new course. And I think going up in grade, he will want every yard of the new course, stamina-wise, to cope with some speedier rivals.
I totally agree with you. You mentioned Imperial Commander, who inspired the name of the ownership group. He won the Ryanair en route to the Cheltenham Gold Cup. And he strikes me as one kind of Ryanair winner, but there are some very different kinds of Ryanair winners. I'm going to start with one of those, which is Under So, and that's why I'm asking the question, what does it take to win a Ryanair?
There's no set rule. Obviously, Under So had top class form at 2 miles, and when he stepped up to the Ryanair, I tried to take my time on him a bit, but he wanted to go faster. Now, it didn't bother me after going 5 furlongs that he wanted to step on, but his pace then put Genuine 2.5 to horse that wanted a bit further under pressure, and he was able to, with some good jumping, put all the horses behind him out of their comfort zone, and he didn't miss a beat. Now, speedsters like Under So do rely on their jumping not to counteract it with stamina, and he just about got home, but it was really good jumping and being able to jump at 2 mile pace that had him well ahead of genuine 2.5 mile horses.
Yeah, he was being borne down on by Sub-Lieutenant come the line. Then you've got a different type of horse. You also rode Victories to victory in the Ryanair.
Yeah, but he was an exceptional horse, and it was, I suppose, an afterthought. He was heading for the Gold Cup, very competitive race, but there was no doubt about his stamina. And this was a strongly contested race. Village Vic jumped out in front, and we went a really good gallop, so quick that it had Vatour in midfield going to the first fence. For a horse that had made it in the Supreme, as he got older, he needed a bit further. But I was then keen to make sure the pace stayed in the middle of the race, and so took Richard Johnson on before we got to the top of the hill and I was trying to make stamina count with him, so I kept the race intense, and by the fourth last we were up in it, so there was no slow down in the middle to not bring stamina into it. That was an end-to-end race, a bit like the one Frodon won, which was end-to-end as well.
Well, we can show you Frodon straight away. This is him winning a couple of years ago. Obviously he ran in the race last year as well, but this is the victory run.
Yeah, and Briney booked him out good and sharp, but it was really good jumping that allowed him, being a fraction slower, to control this race. Sub-Lieutenant is in the blue cap behind him, and he's the one that gets up beside him down the back. But compared to Under So, who's actually behind Frodon here, this race is much more compact than the one Under So won, because it was run at an even 2.5 mile pace, and really good jumping again, like Under So was particularly paramount in this, because it was his jumping that kept Frodon in it, and he was able to then outstay ASO, Mona Lee, and Road to Respect, I think that was in third, or Road to Riches, also those two mixed up. But it was stamina won it for Frodon. But when he pulls out the following year against Min, who had 2 mile pace, Min was able to do Frodon in the middle of the race with speed.
Absolutely. Let's take a look at Min, shall we? I thought this was a superb ride from Paul Townend, actually. You can talk me through it.
Yeah, ridden handily, but because of Min's 2 mile speed, really, he was able to take on Frodon and get Frodon going a little bit faster than Frodon wanted to go, and it was a controlled ride. but 2 mile pace was used in the middle of the race to take the slower ones out of their comfort zone. And if you take any horse out of his comfort zone, they will struggle to stay. And Min just about gets home from St Calvados, but that was using 2 mile speed to shrug off the 2.5 milers in the middle of the contest.
So I'm getting the answer really that it depends, does it? It depends not only on the horse you're riding, which is obvious, but also the horses that are up against you and what type of horses they are and what number of each type there are, if you see what I mean. Because presumably one stayer can't really influence the race, but maybe a couple of high-class stayers could.
Yeah, you need competition. High-class stayers need competition to push each other to make it a stamina contest. And if you allow one speedster to dictate it and then up it to almost 2 mile pace in the middle of the race, it really does catch the 2.5 milers out.
Let's have a look at a Plutard who did struggle in the race last year. Now, he ran the race that Imperial Aura ran last season before going into Grade 1 company. What did you make of how he ran in the Ryanair last year?
Just those 2 clips there, if you watch them, it's how far behind the horses in front of him he gets on landing. See Min going away from him again at the back of the fence. Plutard doesn't seem to land galloping. He seems to land a bit static and loses the length. He's great on takeoff, great through the air, but when he lands, he just seems to lose a half a length. And you start adding up half lengths. You add up 3 or 4 of them through a race, and all of a sudden you have the difference between winning and losing. But he needs to land running better than he does. He lands a bit static for my money.
And we've already seen this season in the Fortria. Wasn't it the same again? A little bit static.
It was just static on landing with 2 milers. I don't know why. Henry's horses are very good jumpers, but he just needs to land galloping. And I think that was the difference between him beating Min and St Calvados and not.
Because he was only a length and 3/4 behind come the line. He managed to grittily hang on in there.
He did, and lost his position early by landing static. But when you then have to ride a horse 3 or 4 times through a race, kick them back into the bridle and back into their position, you're just using the energy. And if he can land running, he's definitely a runner too.
And are we overlooking San Calvados because he looked a threat and he got a little bit checked when Min went to his left at the last?
Probably are. We'll have to wait and see him reappear. But this all started with Imperial Aura and whether he'll win the Ryanair or not. And in last year when he ran at the festival in the Novice Handicap Chase, it was a really hotly contested race early, a big field, but he struggles to almost hold his position early in the race. Now he does get a control of it after going a while, but very early in this race, very competitive. You know, he's David Bass when he lands, see him having to change his hands and squeeze him into the bridle to get him forward. He doesn't want to get any further back than he is on him, and he gets him out and handy at the fence past the stands, and from here on he's in control of it. But being a handicap, look how condensed the field is, because they have steadied up, and he's not going to get that luxury in a Grade 1 where the pace will always stay intenser. Now Galvin is the horse that runs him down. He's Antipode's favourite for the National Hunt Chase at the festival. So in theory, when you look back at this, Imperial Aura probably beat a real stayer. So has he the speed? He's probably improved. His Ascot run shows us he has improved, and he looked like he'd loads left winning there. But early in the race, will he have the tactical speed at Grade 1 level to hold the position? It'll be interesting.
That struck me at Ascot. There's a couple of times, isn't he, when David Bass rode him into a fence to see off Real Steel. Real Steel's potentially been talked about for the Ryanair by Paul Nicholls as well. And it just struck me, Min wouldn't allow him that kind of luxury. You know, if Min turns up, Min is going to be going that strong, quick pace because he can live with top 2 milers.
Exactly, and what it does for the horse who's actually struggling to go with the pace, jumping becomes more paramount. But when you're to the pin of your collar and chasing those jumps, they're harder to find, whereas the horse who's naturally quick, the fences are coming to you rather than the other way around. So it'll make it a bit difficult for David Bass as well.
So how would you ride him in a Ryanair? Imperial Aura?
The smaller field will suit because you won't have as much traffic, but just to the pin of it, he'll just barely be on the bridle, but you hope you won't get too far back.
Just throw in last few. Sam Crows are possible for this race. If we see Faheen anywhere, would it be this race? Might we still see Mellon in this race?
Mellon possibly, but Willie is harbouring thoughts of going up and tripping him. Faheen, yeah, you could do. And the first one you mentioned was?
Sam Crow.
Sam Crow. I don't know. I mean, obviously he was disappointing in Down Royal. He'd have to bounce back from that, but he is a 2 miles and 5 furlongs course and distance winner. So yeah, he would be. But I wouldn't be surprised. Mellon and Faheen, Willie will try them over further, I'd say.
Okay. Right, so those are our preliminary thoughts on the Ryanair, and they're only ever preliminary thoughts with the Ryanair because we don't tend to get the makeup of the full field until nearer the time. That said, we do have a horse that's definitely going for it and a serious contender in that in Imperial Aura. Right, let's move on to what you've been thinking this week. Lots of you have got in touch and we're really grateful for that, and we can start by having a look at Joe Foley-Corra, who says, great read again for the column that you can find on racingtv.com/Road to Cheltenham. He says, I think 33-1 for Fakidudaris on the back of a decent enough run, looking well short of fitness and over an inadequate trip looks massive. He is referring to Fakidudaris' second in the Poplar Square Chase at Navan last week. The camp wanting to step up in trip, I'd be hoping the Ryanair will be the race. Seems like Cheltenham too. What do you think, Ruby?
Well, he was only 4 rising 5, Lydia, and he ran in the Arkle, and traditionally 5-year-olds that stay as well as he did would run further when they get older.
But it was Notebook who won the Poplar Square, and Aidan Heron loved how he was dropped out and settled so well. If they can keep the lid on him, he'll be a force in all the top 2-mile chases. So he's thinking ultimately culminating in the Betway Queen Mother Champion Chase.
I'd say Connections will be hoping that racing stays behind closed doors for Notebook, because I'd say that had a huge factor on his behaviour before the race.
Yeah, you're referring to how he can be a bit hot-headed. We've seen that several times. Dean Watkins said of Notebook, did well to win, hit a few fences and was on and off the bridle. A step up in trip could unlock more potential, in my opinion. What do you think of Dean's take on Notebook?
Yeah, but I think you have to remember Notebook and crew improved hugely from going from hurdles to fences last season. He was a much lower rated hurdler. Fences brought out huge improvement in him, and he could be a horse that improves again now he's a year older. Maybe he'll go up in trip, but he just, I think they'll chance him at 2 miles. He has the pace and he's a brilliant jumper, so 2 miles in Leopardstown at Christmas will tell us where he'll go later in the year.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you about Notebook in terms of the trip. Does he like Cheltenham though? Just so very quickly, does he like it? I mean, he was well beaten as a novice hurdler and he was well beaten in the Arkle.
Yeah, but he boiled over in the Arkle himself and Cashback. There was a false start and both of them went quite a distance to pull up. I'd say as he mentally matures, Cheltenham will be alright for him.
Okay. Let's move on to Wayne Finter's point, and he says, do you think we've seen the Triumph winner yet this season? Recent trends suggest we may have to be a little more patient, and Wayne, we'll get on to your second question later on in the show. But Ruby, if you could just focus on, have we seen the Triumph winner? Is Youmdor potentially a Triumph hurdle winner?
He's a Triumph hurdle horse. Whether he'll be the winner or not, only time will tell, but I wouldn't think so. I think the better juveniles tend to appear a lot closer to Christmas or even after it.
We didn't see last year's winner until very, very late on indeed.
Yeah, she was Fairyhouse in February, I think, burning victory. Goshen, he appeared a bit earlier, all right, and he was going to win, but I think usually sort of, there's a good juvenile hurling Fairyhouse this weekend, and then you've another one at Christmas, and the same in England. The races tend to hot up from here on.
We've had a certain duffel coat being sent over here by Gordon Elliott, and he's won every hurdle race that he's encountered so far. Where are you pegging duffel coat?
I just thought it was interesting that Gordon sent him to Cheltenham last week and didn't keep him for Fairyhouse on Sunday. He obviously thinks he has better ones.
That's how I read it too. Yikes. Right, and the third bit of social media that we're going to talk about is the poll that we did last week, Ruby, the big breakaway, and we were asking whether he has the speed and whether he's good enough to win the Grade 1 Quarto Star at Kempton over the Christmas period. You argued that yes, he was. I argued that no, he wasn't. You won 81% to 19%. That is a landslide victory. You are elected president.
Thanks, Lydia. I just don't like being as controversial as you.
I don't think that's entirely true, and I've got a whole season to completely disprove that. Right, let's move on though. Let's move on to novice chasers. This time last week, Ruby, you were saying that if you had a novice chaser, you would be trying to make him or her into a 2-miler or a proper stayer in order to avoid Envoi Alan. Siskin has made a really impressive debut at Kempton on Monday. He probably heads for the Sporting Life Arkle. Does that mean that if you have a novice chaser, you're going to try and make him a stayer no matter what he wants?
It's just not that easy, but it would look the obvious way to go, turn him into a 3 mile horse or a 3 mile and 6 horse if you wanted to for a novice chase at the festival. But unfortunately, whilst you might be able to push out a 2.5 miler to 3 miles, trying to get a 2 miler to 3 miles is a much more difficult task.
I think it's good news, actually, because it means that one race isn't going to be necessarily set up as the, inverted commas, softer race. There's two really good horses in both the Marsh, potentially, and in the Sporting Life Arkle. And, you know, you're going to have to take one of them on.
Of course you are. And in a steeplechase, anything can happen. In any jump race, anything can happen. And eventually they will. But from a chasing debut point of view, as impressive as Envoy Allen was with what he did, Siskin was the very, very same.
He was. I'll let you describe it.
Look, he went to the first and Nico had a bit of company, and he can be a bit keen. He was a bit keen in the Supreme early on last year, but he was really enthusiastic, and he took Nico to the first with a good jump, and he was the same again going to the second. He gets a little lit up, jumps by the horse that was with him, gets back beside him. From here on then, he's on his own. Let's fly at the first fence past the stands, and Nico counteract that by asking him at the next to ditch. That's the scope he has. Very good at second last. Went a fraction left at the last, but that was as much Nico setting him up as it was the horse. Nico's left hand lifted slightly to take the horse back a little bit, but he was foot perfect. He jumped super. Alright, he was by far the best horse, but what more can any horse do other than what he did? The point that you make about the left-hand rein there, is that because from schooling Nico would be expecting if Siskin's going to go in any direction he might have just left? No, I think he was leading on his near four, and that was the easiest stride to take him a fraction to his left to give himself a little bit more room. Had he been leading on his off four, he probably would have taken him a little bit to the right.
Because there was no obvious bias one way or another, was there really?
No, there wasn't, and it was just finding a fraction of space for the jump, and no, there wasn't. It was perfect.
Obviously, he suffers from comparison straight away, doesn't he? Because Altior started there, and the others had Sprinter Sacra before that, and he's going that kind of route to the Wayward Lad next. But he does look pretty special after the getting back into the race in what happened to him in the Supreme.
He did, even the mistake, losing his place at the top of the hill. A lot of things conspired against him, yet he still managed to do what good horses do, and that's find a way to win.
Okay. I wanted to highlight three chases that happened over 2.5 miles at Goran last Friday. We had them consecutively, and they provide quite an interesting contrast. And we've done this before on Road to Cheltenham and played them against each other, just to show you when we can highlight what we think might have been a very good performance. And we can do that with Animix, who's always had a very good reputation. Also, I'd never heard of prior to this, also with Willie Mullins, called Energamine, and an interesting horse for just control purposes, Hostage to Fortune, who's 120 rated. Animix, by the way, is 150 rated for what it's worth. And this is what happened at Goran.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Energamine. You can go with Energam, however you pronounce it, but I'm going with Energamine anyway. So Paul Townend jumps out front in Energamine and went a good gallop to the first on him, and you can see already in the bottom left how far in front he is of Animix, who was a bit stalled at the first, and they're a long way clear of Hostage of Fortune in the yellow colours in the bottom right. Now, Hostage of Fortune's race was a rated beginner's chase for horses rated 102. This is the first fence in the straight. Energamine is already halfway to the second. Here comes Animix. He's up and over. Hostage of Fortune in the later race, he hasn't even got to the first fence in the home straight by the time Energamine has jumped the second one and is on the way to the last fence. First fence down the back, the gap is still quite considerable. Energamine is still a long way in front of Animix, who's jumping it now, who in turn is a hell of a long way clear of Hostage of Fortune. And by the time we get to the last fence, Energamine is jumping that. Hostage of Fortune's only coming to the third last fence in the bottom right hand side. Energamine's at the winning post almost. Animix jumps the last. What did it prove? It proved Energamine went a really good gallop on soft ground in Goran Park, first time up over fences, and jumped like a buck. And he most certainly is a dark horse, a horse not everyone will have heard of, but he's a horse with a lot of ability. He
definitely is. I mean, the significant thing about that is that he went fast early, and yet he didn't pay for it late. He maintained the gallop.
He did every step of the way, and it just goes to show the gulf in class maybe. Alright, Animix's race was tactical, the one in the middle, but the bottom two were beginners chasers, one with the potential to be a grade 1 and the other horse Hostage of Fortune at the lower level. And you can see in beginners chases every day of the week in Ireland where they're so strung out so early in the race, and that just proves why the difference in class and ability to gallop one horse is able to maintain compared to the others.
Just got two quick questions about, first of all, Energumene. I'll go with you. He did adjust quite a bit to his right. You know, might left-handed tracks prevent something of an issue?
Oh, possibly. I hadn't noticed. He will probably go to Limerick at Christmas anyway, Lydia, and that's right-handed. 2 miles and 3, grade 1 there, the Faheen Novice Chase. So until he turns up in maybe Leopardstown, we're not going to know if it's an issue or not.
And Animix, that was his 6th career start, and he's 7 years of age. He's never managed more than 2 runs in one season. He's no anti-post proposition for anything, is he?
But what race even? He's only had 2 runs over fences. He won a beginner's chase last year. Season was curtailed. He's not a novice now. That was a second season novice chase. It's even where to go with Animix next. It's a difficult enough one.
Okay. Right, that's our novice chase section. Interesting, and hopefully we've found an interesting horse for you in Energumene. We're going to move on next to a question from one of our viewers. Now, you remember I mentioned last week that we've got a new initiative this time around in the Road to Cheltenham series, and that is we're going to ask you to record to camera a question that you have for myself or Ruby, and we're going to be picking the ones that we think are best. And we really like this question from David Harvey, so I'll let him put it in his own words.
Good evening, Lydia and Ruby. Love the show. This week, we've been fortunate enough to see a number of high-profile novice hurdlers and chasers make their seasonal debut. But what I want to know is, from a development and education point of view, is it best to have a tougher first assignment like, say, Fernie Hollow or Bob Ollinger, or something slightly easier like Siskin, or Appreciate It? Thank you.
Thanks, David. I think that's a really good question. It's something, Ruby, I've often wondered myself. What's your take?
I don't really know. I would always be for the easier assignment. You think horses are going to have a long season, so Appreciate It definitely had that with the standard of race he ran in. There wasn't much opposition, but he quickened up nicely to the last hurdle for Paul Townend and won as he liked. We saw Siskin already and how impressive he was, but I think when you watch the Gorham Park race in a minute that Fernie Hollow and Bob Ollinger ran in, it was a really steadily run race, and it turned into a dash down the straight over the last 2 hurdles. Fernie Hollow comes to tackle Bob Ollinger and they sprinted. Obviously Rachel Blackmore and Paul Townend were mindful of their horses for the season and what lies ahead. Neither wanted to empty them out in Gorham Park. So I don't know the answer to the question, but I would have a stronger preference for an easier first target and something to build on rather than emptying your horse in November.
That said, personally, I quite like it when I see a novice having to jump under pressure, because it makes me think that they'll have learned something as a result of that.
Yeah, but you can still do that schooling at home too, and maybe I can see your point, but to me it would be get the job done with as little fuss as possible.
Okay, so I hope we've answered your question, David. It's partly a don't know. I like a little bit of experience myself. Right, let's move on, shall we? We've had some significant staying chasers over the weekend, and a couple of them who've won the race have actually been earmarked for the Grand National rather than the Cheltenham Festival. I'm thinking about Bristol Demai and presenting Percy. So we're going to have a look at what does it take to win a Grand National, because if you think back in previous years, this is the kind of thing, the kind of jump that you used to have to do in order to win a Grand National. That's Papillon. These days, you can get away with this. Here's Magic of Life. I must say I did back her, so I'm really glad she got round, but how she did, I really don't know, and she finished second. So, Ruby, how do you need to jump to win a Grand National these days?
You still need to be brave, Lydia, there's no doubt about that, but the accuracy, you need to be much, much lower now than in the past. Obviously, with the fence has changed, and it does, I suppose, pay if you're a little bit deliberate or high. You're wasting too much energy. You need to be much lower, much slicker, like Tiger Roll. OK, let's have a look at Tiger Roll, shall we? This is him in the National Hunt Chase back in 2017. He's in the white cap in the second Jigginstown colours. If you just keep, I suppose the best thing to watch is actually Lisa O'Neill's white cap and how little that moves, how low it stays. You wouldn't think Tiger Roll even jumped there. He bent his knees and got over the jump. Same with that fence. Lydia, I know Tiger Roll is small, but Lisa's body just barely comes up. You see how low and accurate he is?
Yeah.
So you're thinking in the old days, there's no way he'll get around entry. But that's proven to be what you need right now, is a horse that's as low and accurate as him. And it was part of the reason I went for Radvinda in the last national I rode in, because he was a low, accurate, almost half a hurdle type chaser.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Tiger Roll is a high-class hurdler.
Yeah, but it's still his lowness and accuracy. He hurdles fences, and that's what you need in entry now.
Okay, how about Bristol de May then? He won his third Betfair Chase on Saturday.
Yeah, and he's a brilliant horse and he's beautiful to watch, but he is the old-fashioned traditional jumper, the way he jumps. He does get height, but what Bristol de Mai has that might counteract the lowness is power, and he gets through the air quite quickly. Even though he does go high and he's clean, he still propels himself through the air, which will help him in entry. It's obviously not going to be a bonus to do what he's doing there, but I think he's half a chance because he's brave enough. But watching back, and we had this chat yesterday, we both kind of thought presenting Percy would be ideal. I wasn't so sure after I watched him in Thurles.
You've got an about turned on me. Explain why.
He jams on here. Not that fence, actually, it's the next one. He's quite deliberate. And the more I watched him, I thought, that was the one I was thinking. He was just deliberate for a horse that was warmed up and too clean. I was just thinking, I just think Bristol de Mai is a braver horse. I think presenting Percy could be still be a Gold Cup horse with the performance he put up, but I think he's quite clean and a little more careful, and I'm not sure careful horses win an entry.
He was a really good jumper in his Novice Chase season, wasn't he, when he won that really competitive handicap and then went on to win the RSA?
He is a brilliant jumper and he has great use of his feet, but I know he fell in last year's Gold Cup. Any horse can fall, but I just think if he happens to get a fright early in the race, he could get very high and very clean through it.
Okay, interesting. Right, so those two horses, their trainers have both talked about, or the connections have both talked about the Grand National. Let's talk about the staying races that we saw over the last week, with one eye on the significant Grade 1 staying targets up to and including the Cheltenham Festival. And we'll start with Minella Indo, and you've done a best of Minella Indo here.
Yes, I have. Here he is at the last in the Albert Bartlett. Watch how he looks, but doesn't slow down. Unfortunately, when he came back in the RSA, he does look again, but he slows down this time, maybe because it's a fence and not a hurdle, and that ultimately cost him the race when Champ ran him down. Now here he is in Wexford beating Milan Ladov, still winning and looking, but not slowing down. Pops the last, and he turned up in Navan last Sunday where he beat Brahma Bull. Has a look at the last fence again, but doesn't slow down. I think to me this season has looked like the horse we saw as a novice hurdler, and I think he's a real Gold Cup contender.
I really do. It really gets serious now, though. He's up into Savile's Chase for his next start.
He is, and he'll face presenting Percy, who we saw winning in Thurles, Delta Work, who will have improved for his first run in the North, whatever Willie Mullins may run, Kenboy and whatever else. Obviously, Albion Photo will go to Tremor as he's done the last couple of years, but yeah, the Savile's Chase will be a cracking contest. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think Minella Indo is a real contender for top honours this season. Let's have a look at Cyrname, because he's intriguing, isn't he? We spent a lot of last season talking about him and the effect of the race that he had against Altior at the start of the season. He was upped here to 3 miles and won the Charlie Hall.
He did, and Harry Cobden was very good on him. He went to the first fence with a horse on his right hand side, so he couldn't jump right or to try and eliminate it. But to be fair to Cyrname, he was very straight, as you've saw through all the jumps we've watched since, even over the third last there, and he's galloping over Vindication and I-Right or A-Right. They both run in this weekend's Ladbrokes Trophy, so we'll get an idea of how strong this form is. But you couldn't have been anything but impressed with Cyrname. King George, it's a different ball game. There'll be genuine Grade 1 horses that he'd be taking on, the likes of Clan Des Obeaux, who'll be trying to win a third one. But that was a good performance, and I suppose the only doubt in my mind is the fact that he was so disappointing there last year that you would always have to consider that. But he looks to be in good form, and he's a much different prep going there this year. It is very different. I'll come back to that in a moment. So we were worried about left-handedness. That's out now. We're not worried about that anymore? No, I definitely wouldn't after watching him in Wetherby. To me, he was dead straight. There was no inconvenience to him. Charlie Hall, a relative speed test. He was around the outside. He's not going to be able to have either of those luxuries you would think in a Gold Cup. No, be a long way in a Gold Cup, but No, can you get 3.25 miles? That's a completely different ball game. Silvinaco Conti won the Charlie Hall, the only Charlie Hall I won, and he didn't get the trip in the Gold Cup. So, off the top of my head, I wouldn't be certain of the Charlie Hall record with Gold Cup horses. Seymour Business did, but I can't think of too many others. And yeah, they're different ball games. 3 miles in Wetherby, 3 miles in Kempton, 3.25 miles in Cheltenham. We all know how different that is.
And you've mentioned the different preparations. So Cyrname, who's being prepared, prepared like a gift, like something that Paul Nicholls is carefully nurturing in order to get to the King George in the best possible shape. Meanwhile, the dual title holder had a really tough race against Bristol de May.
He did, but he travelled super all of the in Haydock last Saturday behind Bristol de May, and your eye was drawn to him to be the one that was going much easier from a long way out. Jumps the third last well, gets up sides at the second last, but ultimately Bristol de May shrugs him off from the back of the second last home. And I think Sam Twiston-Davis probably thought he was getting a second bite of the cherry here. Bristol de May slows down, and he's starting to get a rally out of Clan Des Obeaux, who runs all the way to the line. But you're thinking, will that have left the mark between now and Christmas? Paul Nicholls said it after the race that he was worried about it. The only thing is, Clan Des Obeaux is a bit older. You'd be hoping he would be able to take it a bit better, and he most certainly looked fit in Newbury or in Haydock last week, so it hopefully won't have taken too much out of him.
I was going to make exactly those 2 points. You would imagine that he, the first part of the season, he is going to be much more forward than many horses who have their main target being the Gold Cup. Clan Des Obeaux is not going to Cheltenham this year, Paul Nicholls has said, and obviously the main target in the first part of the season is the King George. So the two of them up against each other, which way would you go in the Ladbrokes King George?
I was fully convinced last year it was all about Cyrname, and Clan Des Obeaux absolutely galloped over them. So am I going to jump ship?
Okay.
Probably am. Clan Des Obeaux.
Okay, right. And now let's just think about the Cheltenham Gold Cup just through the prism of the race last year, and these are the significant moments of Album Photo's second victory.
Yeah, and it's been well documented. It was a steadily enough run affair, and how concertina the field are, that's them starting, but they never get much more spread out than this, and it's really relevant, more so relevant on the second circuit. It was a good even gallop to the first fence, but it wasn't what you'd come to expect of Cheltenham Gold Cups now. Caught off stars, first one was a slowly run race as well. Here's Bristol de May, an elegant escape. Kenboy, who was in front, has dropped back, but where it was this, the fourth last, first time around, was not that much from first to last. Down the back straight, the second circuit, Mona Lee has come to the front, Bristol de May is flat to the boards, but Paul Townend has counteracted that and got much further forward on Album Photo in his second Gold Cup than he did in his first one. He's now upside Santini, but you can still throw a blanket over the majority of the field bar Kenboy. They all have a live chance going to the third last, and I don't think that's what we come to expect of Gold Cups. You come to expect the cream to have risen to the top and kind of burnt the rest off. Real Steel and Non-Stayer is nearly upside to the back of the second last, as presenting Percy Falls. Like, who was inconvenienced the most by it? Possibly the winner. He won a nutritional Gold Cup the year before, so he's done really well to win a slowly run one, but it adds intrigue. It makes it all so much more exciting if you can get a Manila Indo or a Presenting Percy out of Christmas, and maybe get something out of the King George as well to be taken on Album Photo come Gold Cup time. It'll make it all the more interesting.
I agree. I think it palpably disadvantaged Santini, possibly even Mona Lee. I think it might have advantaged Lost in Translation, but I think that the winner's impervious.
Yeah, and he could be. So I think of those horses, can you see any of those horses beating them? Maybe not, but you have to add in maybe Manila Indo, maybe Champ. There's two new horses coming to the fore, and a Presenting Percy in a different yard. Stronger
run race, different ride, different headgear for Santini?
Definitely, but I don't know. I don't think when you look back at it, he was in the front rank at the top of the hill. He just didn't have the gears. Album Photo just always going to have too many gears for him.
Year older for Lost in Translation, albeit he was well beaten and looked after in the Betfair Chase, but he was still scrambling to hold third.
I think he's a head scratcher, and I don't know what way you'd go with him or what Colin Tizard will do, but he looked beaten after going a mile in the Betfair Chase, so he is a real head scratcher.
Yeah, that is us thinking, and Robbie Power thinking, that he just hated that kind of ground. They might even miss out the King George if it has a whiff of testing ground, and they might go the Native River route, the Denman, to the Gold Cup.
Yeah, you have to try something, and if it is the ground, well, there's no point in going back there again on it. But I think he's one that if he won the Gold Cup, you'd say, oh, obviously he could, but there's no way you'd back him. You'd be watching him.
Okay. Ruby, thank you so much for your thoughts. Thank you for your company over this road to Cheltenham, and thank you also for your company at home. Make sure you tune in next week, and if you want more, you can always go to the Racing TV website, racingtv.com/Road to Cheltenham. You'll find all the columns there. The latest column is out already, and you'll also be able to catch up on editions of this programme. But we look forward to seeing you again this time next week. Bye for now.